Okay, I've sent it.
Now I check it.
Thank you, Hadi. I have an accent from the northwest of England, which is Cumbria, just south of Scotland. It's basically from where the Starks came from in Game of Thrones. You get the same northern accent, but it's been a little bit softened by my teaching of English for very many years. So just let me know when you want me to begin, Sarah.
Yes, we can begin. It's just a Word, yes, a Word.
It's a Word document. I've just replied to your last message to me, and I've just popped it in there as an attachment.
Yes, I got it. Just the Shelley and Revolution. Yeah. Do you want to share it now?
Yeah, just so that people can keep it and refer to it. I might not quote from the whole thing.
Okay, amazing. And just to mention something, because we have here just more than 80 people, Google Meet just support 100%, but don't worry, we just have another link in the Literature Line group or in the Instagram. You can join that. And if it's possible for the Persian students, you can change your link because other international students just have the first one. Thank you so much. The floor is yours. Thank you, Dr. Bleasdale.
Doctor's fine. I'm not.
So sorry, yes.
Angel, are you raising a hand for a question straight away?
I think it's just a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Okay, right, everybody. I'm sure you're all familiar with Romantic poetry. And you're all familiar with the big famous names of the Romantics. I'm going to talk about a side of the Romantic poets that isn't as prevalent in the popular view, but is very well known in the academic. So you'll excuse me if some of this is familiar to some of you, some of this isn't. But there's an element in which poetry entirely, not just the Romantic movement, has to some degree been spoiled by the Romantic period. Not because of the poetry that was written or the poets themselves, although I would argue there is one poet who is a particular problem when it comes to this. William Wordsworth, because Wordsworth wrote that poetry is about powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. And so there's this idea that poetry's first mission is about personal expression, is about something which let me just show you the screen now. Okay. Present. Okay, it doesn't matter. The point is, this is what we imagine when we hear Romantic poetry. We imagine flowers, we imagine nature, we imagine poetry, introspection, a relationship between us and the world, which is deeply personal. And that image of Romantic poetry has also extended to just poetry in general. And yet the period of time that we're going to talk about with Shelley is a period in which the American Revolution, the French Revolution, had huge emotional and intellectual impact. It was what was happening throughout the world, which was changing the way people were looking at the world and perceiving the possibilities of what it meant to be human and what it meant to live together. And this was revolutionary, not in a way that we think of today. Today, we live in a world where revolutions are relatively common, and we use them to talk about culture. We use them to talk about politics. We can recognize revolutions happening almost on an annual basis in different things, technology, industry. But when the American Revolution happened, a national revolution, and when the French Revolution happened, prior to that, you hadn't had significant political change for hundreds and hundreds of years. The idea of the divine right of kings, the idea of an authoritarian rule, hadn't been disrupted. You know, one side might win, another side might lose. The structures of power were the same and were consistent throughout. Nowadays, of course, we have these icons of revolution, such as the Russian Revolution, the first major 20th century revolution. Revolutionaries became T-shirts and icons, like Che Guevara, who, albeit personally a very austere revolutionary leader, a military man, this picture of him was taken at the funeral of an activist. And so this was not a picture of some sort of glowing, sexy, romantic guy. It was a man who was at a ceremony of official grief. But having said that, for a lot of people, he became this sexy, romantic idea of revolution. And there we have it again, that word romantic, as it becomes somewhat debased to mean fantastical, too much part of the imagination, not a part of the earth, not a part of the realm of politics and detail. Revolutions could be peaceful. They could bring down walls, as in Berlin, and a reunification of Germany. Revolution in this example, it's not about the revolutionaries, but it's also about the people who are on the part of the repressive regimes, the dictatorships, and it's about the soldiers and the functionaries suddenly deciding not to serve them anymore. As soon as the police decide that they're not going to fire on the protesters, the revolution can be peaceful and it can be total. Obviously, obviously this does not always happen. And this example from Tiananmen Square is an icon of absolute peaceful resistance. The man in the picture is just standing there with a shopping bag, a bag of books, and a white shirt, and stopping a line of tanks from approaching. But it's very unlikely that man survived this encounter. We can address revolution with irony as well. Nice day for a revolution. The Guy Fawkes mask refers back to a failed revolution on the part of Guy Fawkes, who wished to blow up Parliament of King James, and who himself was tortured and executed. And every November the 5th, there is bonfire night in England, and effigies of Guy Fawkes are burned. Such is the so he was planted in the calendar of the British as this example of a bogeyman to be destroyed. Okay, remember the 5th of November. Gunpowder, treachery, and plot. If anybody has seen the film V for Vengeance, they'll recognize the character of that mask. Then we have the personal and the political, the way that the politics and love, politics and personal relationships can merge. Who you have a relationship with might well, you have to be political if the state doesn't look on that relationship with approval. Let's get to the romantics, and let's start with this guy, William Wordsworth. Now, there are two generations of romantics, as everybody will know. The first one, Robert Southey, William Wordsworth, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. They represented the old school. They represented, they were already established by the second generation. Keats and Shelley and Byron came along. But at the same time, they were just a second while I stop sharing. They were young once. Yes, exactly. The Lake School. Exactly right. And when they were young, they were utopians. They believed in a new society. They believed that they were going to move to America and they were going to set up and establish a commune. And they were all going to work on the land and they were going to write poetry and they were going to bring up their children communally. And their wives were going to be, there was some notions even of a sort of kind of free love idea. All of this, as they got older, became, they had a, they renounced, they went back on, they tried to forget. And there were lots of relationships. Oh, sorry, Hadi, you wanted to ask a question?
Hadi, are you there? We can't hear you. Yes. Okay. Anyway, I think you can continue, and if it's possible, you can just write it down here in the message.
Yeah, great. So there was this idea that they were going to go to America and they were going to set up a commune, a new society. And this was inspired by the American Revolution. It was inspired by revolution being in the air. It was inspired by the French Revolution. William Wordsworth was in France during the French Revolution. And going back to what I just said about personal lives and being mixed up with the political, he had a love affair while he was in France that was very serious. Let me just share the screen once more, and I'll bring up the handout. This was what he wrote in the prelude, a poem which he wrote almost continuously throughout his life. O pleasant exercise of hope and joy, for mighty were the auxiliaries which then stood upon our side, we who were strong in love. Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven. Okay, so bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven. I mean, a beautiful piece of autobiography. The whole of the prelude is an autobiography that is preparing you for the poem that he is then going to present you with, hence the prelude. The poem was called The Ruined Cottage. And in the end, the prelude became much longer than the ruined cottage that it was supposed to be preluding. And it ultimately shows that William Wordsworth, especially towards, well, no, not necessarily towards the end of his life, but became much more interested in his own autobiography than he did in sort of the other people around him. He sort of went very deeply into that, and that was something he was going to renounce. He was going to go back through the prelude as he was older, and he was going to take out pieces, and he was going to change things, and he was going to, even this he would leave in because he would think, well, I was young, you know, and you have this old idea of when you're young, you're radical, and as soon as you get to a certain sensible age, you can ignore that period and write it off as you know, youthful enthusiasm. One of the older poets who I haven't mentioned yet, but who doesn't fit in with anybody because he had no correspondence really with anyone, was William Blake. And William Blake is a true revolutionary of a poet. He's incredibly radical. His radicalism is based on a very unique individual sense of religion. And a very, very small sect of sort of revolutionary Christianity, a kind of Christianity which is deeply steeped in a sense of the sensual rather than a denial of it. So his poems are absolutely rich with this enthusiasm and feeling of warmth and wealth, of sensation and lived experience. And he was an enthusiast. He was an artist and would engrave his poetry with the handwriting. His engraving would be backwards so that it would print in the correct direction. And if you read this song, which is from one of his prophetic books, this was put to music later and was used as a hymn. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. The idea of we're going to build the kingdom of heaven here as a political aim, you know, Jerusalem as an idea of beauty and spiritual wholeness, we're going to create in England. It's not some foreign place. It's not some over there. We're going to do it here. And that's but it's a pity Blake was not as well known during his time as he has since become. Nowadays, he's probably the romantic. Oops, I've done an infinity mirror. He's probably a romantic who has survived the most in terms of reputation, because he can have art exhibitions in the Tate, and he can have, you know, best-selling books, new editions, new biographies coming out every year. So he's really gained in reputation, whereas someone like Wordsworth, you know, he's read as a postcard poet. He's read as somebody who is good for the tourist industry in the Lake District. He's read in school books because his poems are easy. So there's an element where Wordsworth is I don't want to play him down too much, but anyway, let me leave Wordsworth and I'll move on, so that I don't spend too much time dissing people. Let me just 1 second. I'll go back to the screen and we can get back to one moment. Okay. I've sort of skipped one slide, a couple of slides here. So Wordsworth, Coleridge, fantastic poet, revolutionary, very difficult to contain, was always interesting right up until his death. You know, lived a very long time, incredibly important in the way literary theory developed, a big thinker about thinking. Lord Byron once said of Coleridge that he's explaining metaphysics to the nation. I wish somebody would explain his explanation. Lord Byron was really a precursor to Oscar Wilde. He was full of wit. He was dark. He was cynical. He was ironic. He was scandalous. He was rich. He was bisexual. He enjoyed dressing up, and he was very, very political. One of the this excerpt here can show you just how political he is. But never mind, God save the king and kings, for if he don't, I doubt if men will longer. I think I hear a little bird who sings. The people by and by will be the stronger. So he's going against the king and for the people. The veriest jade is a horse, will wince whose harness rings so much into the roar as quite to wrong her. Beyond the rules of posting and the mob, at last falls sick of imitating Job. The man from the Bible, Job, we would pronounce him, but he pronounces him Job to rhyme. At first it grumbles, this is the people. Then it swears, and then like David flings smooth pebbles against a giant. At last it takes to weapons such as men snatch when despair makes human hearts less pliant. Then comes the tug of war. It will come again, I rather doubt, and I would fain say fie on it, if I had not perceived that revolution alone could save the earth from hell's pollution. Now, in the context of the older poets, I would say that there is something, there is an explanation for why they became conservative, because they saw the French Revolution turn into Napoleon. So they saw the idea of revolution and popular democracy turn into dictatorship. And it was a little bit like what we saw in the 20th century, where we saw communism turn into Stalinism and Maoism, and something that wasn't democratic, wasn't free, and let's face it, killed millions and millions of people. And that's not a detail. That's enough to make you think maybe having a revolution is not a good idea. So 1789, everything's great. Oh, bliss in that was it to be alive. To be young was very heaven. But then after 1789, in the 1790s, and then in the early 19th century, then things go wrong, and you have someone like Napoleon come along and kill, thousands and thousands of people. And so maybe the revolution is too big a risk. Maybe people are better off staying with the devil they know than courting the devil that they don't know. Now, in this context, Shelley, born in 1792, so he's born after the French Revolution has begun, so he doesn't know what it was like in 70. That for him, that's the 1960s. For him, that's something that happened before he was born, and seems groovy. His early life was marked by rebellion. He went to Eton, he went to private schools, he came from a rich family, although where they got their money from was a little bit controversial. But his father was a Conservative MP, member of Parliament. He was very well to do, and he wanted to be respectable. His father, Timothy Shelley, Sir Timothy Shelley. Bysshe himself wasn't, he always called himself Bysshe, and his friends called himself Bysshe, and this is partly to do with when he was in Italy, he found that Bysshe was a dialect word for snake, and so he had the idea of being the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the tempting people to bite the apple and learn things. And he went to Oxford University, and when he was at Oxford University, he'd already published 2 Gothic novels at the age of 18 and a collection of poetry, all of which are terrible. His juvenilia, it's not very good. They're not really worth reading beyond an academic interest. While he was at Oxford, he published the first prose confession or philosophical argument for atheism, which, as you can imagine, at the beginning of the 19th century was not a thing that was often done. It was called The Necessity of Atheism, and he did it. If you like to imagine him today, he would be considered like a troll. He wrote this pamphlet anonymously, and then he would send it to bishops and members of the church and members of the university, and he would say, I was walking down the street and I found this and I read it and I thought, wow, this has got some really interesting ideas, but I'm really worried of losing my Christian faith. Would you sort of give me some reply that will help me to understand, to not believe, to not fall for this pamphlet? And the bishop or the priest would start, yes, of course, my child, this is what you should think. And then Shelley was into the argument he wanted to be into and would start trying to convert the bishop into atheism. Not surprisingly, he was kicked out of university at this point. We're going to jump a little bit forward. There were moments in his life where he didn't do things which were, let's say, great. He was he was bad luck to know if you were a woman, for instance. He married Harriet Westbrook when she was 16. Then he abandoned her to marry Mary Wollstonecraft, partly because he really admired her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. Well, she was, yeah, Mary Wollstonecraft, who had died giving birth to Mary Wollstonecraft, who became Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, of course. And he also admired her father, William Godwin. They eloped to Europe with her half sister, Claire Clairmont, and they lived a very dramatic life where they met. Yes, Moadese, Zara will send you the file. During one of the meetings with Byron and Polidori, Byron's dentist, they had the famous evening on Geneva Lake in which Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, or what would become Frankenstein. Polidori wrote The Vampire, which very much inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula. Shelley and Byron, the kind of geniuses, didn't write anything of worth. so it's like you get four people together to write ghost stories, and the two people who are meant to be the writers don't produce anything and the other two do. So that's something to always bear in mind. But what's important today is I wanted to talk about the idea of revolution, because this is at the heart of all the things that Shelley does. Shelley was an absolute radical in every aspect of his life. He was a vegetarian before vegetarianism was a thing. He was an atheist before, when nobody was an atheist. One of the most controversial things he wrote in a hotel guest book. Everybody went to the mountains in Switzerland and saw these beautiful mountains. And when they saw the mountains, they would come down and they would write in the guest book, "Oh, sublime, it proves how wonderful God is. It proves that God exists." And Shelley came down and wrote, Percy Bysshe Shelley, atheist. And of course, everybody who came through that hotel would open the guest book and see that and be shocked, as like, who is this guy? To the point that when he died, one of the newspapers reported his death by saying, "Percy Bysshe Shelley, who wrote some infidel verses, is dead. Now he knows whether there is a God or no." And so, he was more famous for being an atheist than he was for being a poet. Okay. His ideas were proto-socialist. They were absolutely about the equitable distribution of wealth. And this is, again, coming from a man who comes from a wealthy background. But he very much believed in this, and it ruled his entire life. He could have at any point gone back to his father and said, I forgive me, my ideas were wrong, done a Wordsworth, and he would have been rich for the rest of his life, but he never did. So he really did put his money where his mouth was as well. He had to sort of scrabble for money all his life, and he had an allowance, but he was never wealthy, and he had, he suffered, and so did his household. Why? What inspired him to be so radical? Well, let's have a look at one of his poems. This is a sonnet, which is a poem which is, has been made famous throughout history. Maybe his wife inspired him. Absolutely, no, absolutely. His relationships throughout his life were. I mean, this is part of the problem with criticizing him in terms of his treatment of women, because one of his problems was he didn't really believe in monogamy, and he was living in a society in which monogamy was the absolute norm. It was unthinkable to think anything else, just as atheism was unthinkable. He wrote a poem called Epipsychidion, which was about having multiple sexual partners. And he said, "Love in this differs from gold and clay, that to divide is not to take away." In other words, if you love more than one person, your love increases. It doesn't half. Okay. And so, yeah, he was having affairs, but he wasn't having affairs like as a sort of sneak. He was he sort of thought, well, why shouldn't we love more than one person? What's wrong with that? You know, why should we? This is what I mean by a true revolutionary. It wasn't just a political revolutionary. It was a revolutionary in the way he thought about all human relationships. Now, some of his ideas meant that that they were, you know, a little bit crazy. There's an idea that he has in one of his poems that he expresses that, like, yes, please, Eleanor. Did Eleanor want to ask a question?
No, sorry, it's just by mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries, no worries. I was going to talk about a mad idea he had. Actually, I'll skip that, but only to say that there was some of his ideas that, you know, even for today, you would think that's a little bit too radical. That's a little bit too well. Okay, you're all curious about what idea was that? It was the idea of rape being. He said, if we didn't have such a notion of sexual puritanism and everything, then rape wouldn't be that bad. In that you wouldn't feel shame because you wouldn't be shamed because of rape. They wouldn't have the idea of you've been rendered dirty, you know, that dishonored. You know, it's like, oh, it's got nothing to do with honor, don't worry about it, you're okay. Yes, it's a horrible thing to happen to you. No, it shouldn't happen to you, but don't have an exaggerated sense of your purity that has been soiled. You haven't been soiled. If you are pure of heart, no one can touch that. So I kind of see where he's going, but at the same time, all right, Queen Mab, he wrote while he was in Wales, and this is his poem where he, you know, years before, decades before Nietzsche says God is dead, he has Queen Mab say there is no God, and he refers to Moses as the murderer, and he talks about political revolution. The interesting thing is he does it in the framework of a literary sort of magicness, something that's that's very imaginative. Queen Mab comes from Romeo and Juliet and Mercutio's speech, where she is this sort of fairy trickster, this mythical creature that comes along and does all these crazy things at night. But he uses her as an agent of political action, political activity, and political oracle. She's going to tell. She's a marginal figure from the underworld and from the netherworld who's going to tell you a lot of things which are. Which I'm not telling you this. This is Queen Mab. I didn't write the pamphlet. I just found it on the road. I didn't go to Ireland and chalk things on the wall. Actually, I did. You know. That's another thing. He went to Ireland because he wanted Ireland to be independent from the English. So, you know, all these things are, you know, at the time they wouldn't come true for 200 years, but they would come true. You know, but nowadays we would welcome Shelley and we would have a conversation with him, and he would kind of be in the left, you know, of a recognizable political landscape. At the time he was writing, he was in a radical position all his own. There were some people out there, but real minority. I want to just go to another poem to give you the context of let me bring up my PowerPoint again so I can show you this. See, every time we do it, I'll do this so that you get a quick what we were. Okay, England in 1819. This is a sonnet, an old, mad, blind, despised, and dying king. Okay, this is a slightly. I'm going to give you a lesson on the importance of punctuation in a second. So this is England. This is just like a snapshot of what is happening in this year. An old, mad, blind, despised, and dying king, George III. Princes, the dregs of their dull race, who flow through public scorn, mud from a muddy spring. Rulers who neither see nor feel nor know, but leech like to their fainting country cling till they drop blind in blood without a blow. A people starved and stabbed in the untilled field, an army whom liberticide and prey make as a two-edged sword to all who wield, golden and sanguine laws which tempt and slay, religion Christless, godless, a book sealed, a senate, time's worst statute, unrepealed, are graves from which a glorious phantom may burst to illumine our tempestuous day. So just a note for any editors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Line 6, after the word blow, that shouldn't be a full stop. That should be a comma or a semicolon, because this is all one sentence. This is all, the whole sonnet is one sentence. And what it is it's a list of things: a king, princes, rulers, people, an army, laws, religion, a senate. All of these things are, that's the first verb, are graves. It's not the main verb though. Are graves from which, so this is like, we're looking at a cemetery, okay? And these things, it's like a political cartoon. These things are creating a phantom, a ghost, which is coming out, a glorious phantom, a big spirit that's coming out. May, there's the verb, may, a conditional, a modal verb to express possibility. May, not must, may burst to illumine our tempestuous day. Okay? Now, somebody later in the 19th century would write a manifesto in which they talked about a ghost going around Europe and changing the political landscape. And this was called the Communist Manifesto and was written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And it's just very interesting that they use the same metaphor as Shelley because they read Shelley. So this is one example of how Shelley has been hugely influential, because this idea of all these things, all these, the king, the rulers, the princes, the laws, the religion, organized religion, these are all factors which will perhaps conditionally create a revolutionary opportunity, a moment in which everything can change. Okay? What it will change to, I don't know, but it might change. And that's and that's what he's and that's what he's creating there. And he's doing it in a sonnet, which is a kind of slightly is a very self-contained poem. You know, is a very, he's very formal. He's very good technically as a poet. He wrote about 100 sonnets in his life, and he only repeated his rhyme scheme once. I know, I've gone through the whole lot and I checked them out, and he's only repeated in all the sonnets from his youth to when he died. He was aged 29 when he died, so he was a young man. But in all those sonnets, how was he keeping track of every single one and checking that they were, you know, they were always different, always different. What a credible experiment that he made of his own poetry. Technically brilliant. This was no anarchist. This was someone who was just because he was lazy. He was absolutely happy to apply himself. He just didn't like authority when it was arbitrary. You know, he didn't like an idea of power which was not based on justice, as in everyone being treated well. Another poem. I'm sorry if I'm going quickly, by the way, but this is this is like a 2-hour lecture that I'm doing well, as quickly as I can, but hopefully I'll have enough time. Right, this is let's go to the handout. So we've done England in 1819. There you go. See, in my version here, it's a comma. Ozymandias which is a wonderful poem, again, another sonnet, is all about, it's more philosophical. It's less about England in 1819 could be a newspaper, it could be a political cartoon, it could be a satire. But Ozymandias, you can read any day of the week, any time. It's timeless. It's about time. It's about how time sweeps everything aside, that any power, any human power, is nothing compared to the power of the universe. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. It's just, you know, the face in the sand of the most powerful king of kings, looks like Mussolini, maybe. The wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, you know. It's all those pictures of it's all those statues of Lenin being dragged to the ground in 1990, 1991, when the Soviet Union fell. You know, we are familiar with you know, fascists and dictators having their statues broken and toppled once their rule is gone. They all end up collapsing of one way or another, and time will just get rid of them. They'll cancel them. I love the way as well the some of the rhymes are sort of hidden inside the poem. I met a traveler from an antique land, and then stand in the desert, near them on the sand. So land, stand, sand, stone goes to stand. It's just such a beautifully evolved poem where things just pop up where you don't expect them to. The rhymes are popping up inside the poem as well as at the line endings, and that alliteration, the lone and level sands stretch far away, you know, it has a lovely lilting, haunting sound. Shelley, let me just stop sharing. As Shelley, so timeless, it was, oh yes, yeah, absolutely it was. I mean, that's how, again, that's sort of Shelley's reputation, I think, you know, continues, because we're becoming more like Shelley than you know, he's coming towards us, you know, or we're coming towards him. We're moving towards his position more and more, and we kind of we need our revolutionaries, not because they're always right or because they're always practical, but because they give us permission to imagine different futures. I'll give you an example. Today, what we're doing right now is revolutionary. If you said, you know, we were going to do this 20, 30, 100 years ago, there are so many factors in what we're doing technologically, industrially, in terms of gender, in terms of, I mean, this meeting, this Google Meet, this lesson today is utopian, okay, from every point of view, 100 years ago, and now it's reality. Now we don't even think about it. Now what we're doing, where it's just routine. You do it every week, you know. But it was unthinkable. It was inconceivable. Okay, so that's why that's how we've got to look to the future. We're going to be living in a future in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, which is going to be just as inconceivable from the point of view of structure, technology, politics, relationships between men and women. just as inconceivable as what we now are would be to the people in the past. Okay, and we have these occasional people like Shelley who somehow have a time machine and manage to see into the future. He was a poet of change, and to some degree he moved away from like a magical figure like Queen Mab, and he looked towards the natural world, and he saw something that was that the natural world would give him as inspiration when he was living in Italy, which he spent most of his adult life, like me, living in Italy. I'll show you another of his poems. This is a longer poem, and it's about the west wind. Oh, wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter's fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes. O thou who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion o'er the dreaming earth and fill driving sweet buds like flocks to thin air with living hues and odors, plain and hill, wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh hear. Now, the weird thing about this is it sounds like he's praying, and it's all this thing about corpses. And again, are we listening to this and feeling that gothic novelist that he was when he was a teenager? Ghosts and corpses and everything, but also he's a bit of a scientist. So actually he understands how seeds work, and he understands that seeds go into the ground in autumn, are covered up and seem to be dead, and then they rise again in the spring. For him, science was not the opposition of magic. It was the explanation of magic. It was a continuation of magic. It was something, science was the most magical thing because it was about realizing how things really work. And something being invisible and moving things was for him a perfect metaphor for how poetry works, how words work. Words and poetry are like the west wind. They are something which is invisible, but which are agents, are active revolutionary agents. The wind literally takes the leaves off the trees, takes the seeds off the trees, and blows them across the fields where they will gather, and they will wait until spring, and they will grow. And this is a revolutionary activity that nature does. And this is important because people will say that radical thought, innovation is not the natural way of doing things. Things are like they are, divine rights of kings, women being subservient to men, because that's natural, that's the order, that's what God has given us, that's the way it should be. Well, he looks to nature and says, no, nature is revolutionary. The earth turns, seasons come and go, and things change violently in nature. And he looks up at the sky and he sees angels of rain and lightning in the second stanza. He sees volcanoes. He sees all these things which are revolutionary. And he, in the last stanza, which I'm just about to read you, he says, I want to be this. Make me thy lyre. That's a musical instrument, often used like a harp, often used as a metaphor for poetry. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. So as you blow through the forest, you make all this noise. You blow through my strings and you make this poem, you make this music. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? He was worrying about his hair falling out. It's a rare Shelley joke. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone. Sweet though in sadness be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit. Be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth and by the incantation of this verse, there's the magic again, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. Be thou my lips to unawakened earth, the trumpet of a prophecy, O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? So, I mean, imagine this, how dangerous this is. He's saying, let me be the propaganda which will start a revolution. Scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks. So the wind will blow down the chimney and will spread the ashes and that is still red with fire, still glowing, and it will spark and create a fire. Now, most of us would say, hey, wait a minute, that's not a good thing. You're going to set the house on fire, you know. But Shelley's point, he's a revolutionary, he's a radical. He wants to destroy the world in order to make the world anew. He wants the old system to be destroyed and a new one to arise from the ashes, like the phoenix. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy. And then you have this, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Even if things are getting bad, things will change, will become better. So this brings us back to 1819, and there is a singular event in 1819 which was once called was named Peterloo. This happened when a pro-democracy demonstration was held in the St. Peter's Fields in Manchester, right of Manchester. Now the GMEX and the revolution, it had grown from several hundred people to 200,000 people in the space of 20 years, so very, very quickly. Most of these people were living in terrible conditions, working very hard, making people very rich, but themselves not having any say in who would represent them in Parliament. So there were very few voters who were allowed or eligible to vote in the elections. So they held these huge peaceful demonstrations in which a famous speaker would come along, that you can see in the picture in the cartoon here at the background, where they're saying shame, shame, murder, murder. And the local militia, with the approval of the magistrates, under the orders of the magistrates, charged into the crowd with their sabers and killed a number of people, including women and children. And this is a political cartoon which shows this happening. And it's, you know, oh, pray, sir, don't kill Mammy. She only came to see Mr. Hunt. That was Mr. Orator Hunt. There has been a film by Mike Lee called Peterloo, made about this. And there's been a wonderful novel called Blood is on the Grass, a novel of Peterloo, written by, oh, how embarrassing. Oh, I forgot that I wrote that. That's embarrassing. Sorry about that. But it's available on Amazon and other places. This was a huge event because it was a moment where the government and the king and everybody in power thought that there was a revolution was going to take place. It was going to be an English revolution. There was a closeness. This period was full of demonstrations, full of things happening. And Shelley, the revolutionary, was in Italy. He was far away. He was unable to. Yeah, exactly. The Mask of Anarchy is related to this massacre. And so what he did is he wrote about Peterloo and what happened, and he included his own guilt about not being there. And this is one of the poems on the handout, and I'll share the screen again so we can we can look at it together. This is at the beginning. He says, as I lay asleep in Italy, there came a voice from over the sea, and with great power it forth led me to walk in the vision of Posey. And you might hear that this has, again, that incantation that he talks about in Ode to the West Wind. It has a sort of rhythm which is very fast and very, it's written to be memorized. It's written to be sung. It's written to be recited. It's written very simply. Its main aim is to communicate. Again and again, also, it's like a cartoon, like the illustration we just saw. I met Murder on the way. He had a mask like Castlereagh. Very smooth he looked, yet grim. 7 bloodhounds followed him. So this is really interesting. Castlereagh is the foreign secretary, and Shelley is saying that Castlereagh isn't the problem. He's what is wearing today. You know, the political people who we hate or who we are against or who we are opposed to, them as personalities are just the mask. What you should be looking at is capitalism or warmongering or profiting or injustice. You know, those are the things which are always going to be there unless you address them. You know, if a particular leader dies, it doesn't stop the forces that brought that leader to power from continuing and from just picking another one out. All were fat and well they might, being the 7 bloodhounds are the members of the Holy Alliance that after the Napoleonic War sort of carved up Europe and made it made sure that the divine right of kings was once more adopted. All were fat and well they might, be in an admirable plight, for 1 by 1 and 2 by 2 he tossed them human hearts to chew, which from his wide cloak he drew. No subtlety is being used here. Next came Fraud, and he had on, like Eldon, an ermined gown. So this is the Home Secretary, who's the Minister of Justice. His big tears, for he wept well, turned to millstones as they fell, and the little children who round his feet played to and fro, thinking every tear a gem, had their brains knocked out by them. Clothed with the Bible as with light, and the shadows of the night, like Sidmouth next, hypocrisy on a crocodile rode by. And many more destructions played in this ghastly masquerade, all disguised even to the eyes, like bishops, lawyers, peers, or spies. Last came Anarchy. He rode on a white horse splashed with blood. He was pale even to the lips, like death in the apocalypse. Okay, so all these forces, this particular ministry, sorry?
No, everything.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue then. All of these people are just, they're just the accidental, momentary manifestations of universal forces which are always happening. So it's not that, you know, yes, we need to deal with these particular people, but don't mistake them for the essential problem. That once you get rid of, let's say, Donald Trump, for example, once you get rid of Donald Trump, you'll have absolutely succeeded in getting contradictions exist in American politics. It won't. It needs more. It needs, in other words, it's what we call today systemic problems. You know, there are systemic flaws in a system, and just changing a few people isn't going to change that. What you need to do is revolutionize the system itself. Okay. Now, what do you do practically when you've had a massacre? And you know, what's the next step? Now, here, Shelley again is hugely influential to the future because he suggests something which is unexpected and once more amazingly radical. He tells people to go and to have another demonstration and to stand there and then and to basically wait for the soldiers to come again. And when they do come, if they attack, then that attack will inspire the whole of the country to rise in revolution. And that this is the from you can read this here, and that slaughter to the nations shall steam up like inspiration, eloquent, oracular, a volcano heard afar, and these words shall then become like oppression's thundered doom, ringing through each heart and brain, heard again, 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 rise like lions after slumber in unvanquishable number, shake your chains to earth like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. Does that sound familiar? Well, you might not be surprised that Gandhi was a huge fan of Percy Bysshe Shelley. Gandhi's vegetarianism was partly to do with him reading Gandhi in Oxford, where, of course, Shelley had gone as well. And the idea of passive resistance, Gandhi didn't like the phrase passive resistance. It's peaceful protest. The idea of peaceful protest. You turn up at a place, you offer no violence, and you submit to violence. And if that violence happens to you, then hopefully, and I know this is a very hard sell in the world as we live in it today, especially some of you guys, hopefully that will inspire other people and that will change the world. You will win the moral victory. You will win. You will win. When it comes down to it, at some point, it will turn, and you will not have killed people. You will not have hurt people. You won't be guilty of what they're guilty of. You will have maintained your own political purity. And yet, at the same time, contained in that poem, there are these metaphors which are violent. Rise like lions. Lions are not domestic kittens. It's not rise like kittens after slumber and tickle people. Rise like lions. So there is always an edge with Shelley. There's always this sense of like peacefully if we can, and if we can't, well, we did try peacefully. So there is this idea that is there a volcano, an unextinguished hearth? These are destructive things. These are things which are violent. These are things which are powerful. To some degree, they're also a thing which are indiscriminate. They're not going to just choose to destroy this, and this. They're going to just go everywhere. So there is a sense that he's literally playing with fire. Okay, but he also sees that similarly to if Castlereagh and Lord Liverpool and Eldon and Sidmouth, if they are all just masks of a political moment, of forces which are much bigger than them, then who is he as an artist? Who is he as a poet? But the mask of another movement, of a contrary movement, a revolutionary movement that is brought out like the Phantom from England in 1819, just from the circumstances and situation that are there. So if you will allow me, just this will be the final thing I'll show you. In his defense of poetry, he argues, this is a very long essay, but he argues that essentially an artist can't help but be revolutionary when the world is being revolutionary. For the literature of England, an energetic development of which has ever preceded or accompanied a great and free development of the national will has arisen, as it were, from a new birth. In spite of the low-thoughted envy which would undervalue contemporary merit, our own will be a memorable age in intellectual achievements, and we live among such philosophers and poets as surpass beyond comparison any who have appeared since the last national struggle for civil and religious liberty. He's saying This age is full of amazing artists and writers. Okay, why? Because we're in a moment of struggle. The most unfailing herald, companion, and follower of the awakening of a great people to a beneficial change in opinion or institution is poetry. At such periods, there is an accumulation of the power of communicating and receiving intense and impassioned conceptions respecting man and nature. So there is an accumulation of the power of communicating and receiving. In other words, the audience become better and the poets become better. And here, for poets, just read writers, artists, musicians, filmmakers. Okay? Anybody engaged in cultural activity will become more ambitious and more interesting when the environment around them is being inspired by a moment of struggle and change. The person in whom this power resides may often, as far as regards many portions of their nature, have little apparent correspondence with that spirit of good of which they are the ministers. So the individual artist might not even have anything to do with it, might not even agree with some of the stuff that's going on. But even whilst they deny and abjure, they are yet compelled to serve that power which is seated on the throne of their own soul. So it doesn't matter if you're conservative or right wing, if you're or stick in the mud. If you are a true artist, it will be the spirit of the time which you will be communicating. It is impossible to read the compositions of the most celebrated writers of the present day, Wordsworth, without being startled with the electric life which burns within their words. They measure the circumference and sound the depths of human nature with a comprehensive and all-penetrating spirit, and they are themselves perhaps the most sincerely astonished at its manifestations, for it is less their spirit than the spirit of the age. Poets are the hierophants of an unapprehended inspiration, the mirrors of the gigantic shadows which futurity casts upon the present. The words which express what they understand not, the trumpets which sing to battle and feel not what they inspire, the influence which is moved not but moves. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. The unacknowledged legislators of the world. So as we have this idea of the trumpet, the trumpet doesn't feel the music. The trumpet is just a piece of metal. So the artist is just the piece of metal, and the music and the inspiration, the breath that comes, literally the expiration, the breath that is going through the trumpet is history, is people, is what's happening around you. And the music is the future. They are the shadows of the future, Shelley says. I mean, what a revolutionary thought. How amazing. So we can see these countries which have gone through amazing change. And there's always this pushback. There's always the backlash. There's always the reaction to this change. But still, we move forward. And still things manage to improve, will improve. We've got to believe that. Even if we're looking backwards, we're looking forwards. That phrase, ye are many, they are few, was used by the British Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn as their manifesto. And so the revolution might not happen in the way it happened. In fact, it definitely won't happen the way it happened in the past. It definitely won't happen like it happened in the French Revolution. It won't take place like it happened in Russia or like it happened anywhere else. There'll be a new form. Every revolution will create its own mode of expression. It could be totally different. It will be totally different. It has to be, you know, and it will succeed eventually, or even incredibly quickly. You know, somebody once said, "How does bankruptcy happen?" And the bankrupt businessman said, "At first, very, very slowly, and then very, very quickly." And I think that's true of a lot of things. Percy Bysshe Shelley was somebody who he really was somebody who seemed to be remembering the future. And as such, he's somebody who, although he's one of the more difficult romantic poets, I'm not going to deny it. He's a hard read. You have to work to get into him. He's a very clever man, and he doesn't make any allowance for that. I mean, except maybe for Mask of Anarchy. But I think his example is a real inspiration today, and I think we could learn a lot from romantic, which is not confined to daffodils, and it's not confined to emotional responses, as important as they may be in different contexts. It's just not only that. Okay, thank you for listening. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Thank you so much. It is fantastic, actually. And it would be so pleasure. So guys, if you have any questions, it says, can you explain Prometheus Unbound? It seems like one of his major works and sounds very revolutionary and inspiring. The lady.
Yeah, Prometheus Unbound was his major work. Undoubtedly his masterpiece, I think. There are some other poems which go along. It's a sort of like, it's a sequel to a classical play by Aeschylus called Prometheus Bound, and just the addition of the prefix is a revolution. You know, it's like Prometheus, this god that gave mankind fire. It's like a version of the Garden of Eden, you know, giving mankind knowledge, and then being punished for it and having his liver pecked out on a every single day, and then it would regenerate, and then the eagle would come and peck the liver out once more. So he rewrites it, and he rewrites it in terms of the freeing of the god, the freeing of this knowledge, the freeing of humanity from this sense of sin and eternal punishment. Why do we have to always go round and round and round and have this punishment? And he has this wonderful line which Yeats stole, he borrowed, and he made his own with the second coming. And the line goes, the good want power, except to weep bitter tears, and the powerful goodness want. And here want means like I want to have some ice cream, but it also means lack. It also means I want something because I lack it. I don't have it. Okay. Sometimes poverty is called want in the 19th century. So the good want power, the good don't have power, they need power, and the powerful goodness want. So the powerful aren't good. And Yeats changed that to the best lack all conviction and the worst are filled with passionate intensity, which is good. Yeah, it's a good line, but it's not quite as good as the good want power, the powerful goodness want.
So any questions? Just the passionate of the guys, this community. We are so thankful that you accept our invitation. It means a lot to all of us, and for sure I hope to have you a lot here, maybe about some other workshop again. And yes, Ali, you have a question, I think.
Yes, hello, Doctor. Considering the French Revolution and Lord Byron, may I have a question about the...
Sure.
What do you think about Lord Byron as the only romantic who did not recant his belief in French Revolution?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I mean, the thing with Byron is that he he had something of a Bonaparte fixation. He liked the fact that when he became a lord, he was Noel, you get to choose another name. And he called himself Noel Byron. So he had NB, Napoleon Bonaparte, as his signature. And so, as far as he was concerned, the fact that the French Revolution led to Napoleon Bonaparte was to some degree tragic, but was kind of attractively tragic. It was kind of something that he could see himself in the great man. And there's something about Byron which was, he was very radical in a certain way, but he was never willing, he never wanted to give up the power that he had. His criticism of power would be, I'm not the person in charge, whereas Shelley's criticism of power is nobody should be in charge. And those are two totally different ideas of how power should operate. He also, I feel there was something of the Calvinist in Lord Byron from his Scottish background. And Calvinism is a religion which believes that everything is already decided. It's already done. God has already mapped everything out. And so there is, it's not going to change anything, you deciding you don't like this or you deciding you disagree with it. Just enjoy the ride. You'll enjoy the being young and William Wordsworth, and when Napoleon comes along, it's not as good, but there are aspects of it that you can get on with. Also, he had a sort of Napoleonic entourage where he rode around in a huge carriage with a zoo of animals that would come around with him. But he was very much for liberation. He fought, he died on the shores of, on his way to Greece to fight in a war of national liberation. So also, again, he wasn't shy of putting himself on the front line, so to speak. He was, he was partly killed by his doctors, as everybody was in those days. Poor people, ironically, lived a bit longer because their diets were better and they didn't go to doctors, and because doctors would bleed you, and that would actually leave you weaker and less able to recover from illness than poor people who can afford them. So I hope that answers in some way your question. I just think he really admires power and powerful men, and even if they're wicked, it's kind of he can't quite. Don Juan is a good example of that. It's this Don Giovanni type of person who's a bit feckless and everything, but he's playing with that Byronic hero that.
Thank you for the answer, and also thank you for a great presentation. It was quite informative and great. Thank you.
A pleasure, Ali. Thank you for your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Helena?
It was yourself enjoy a lot and hope. Yeah, other guys just give their thankfulness. As you told us, we actually create a revolution. I think more than 100 people. We have to create another links, and to have my other colleagues. That's the Kapuscuri and the collaboration of 8 universities of Iran. Yes, it would be my honor and pleasure to do that, hold this actually ceremony, something like that, or workshops. Thank you so much. It's marvelous. And I think for all the guys, it would be so means. Yes, Elena.
Yes, sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Professor. I would like to ask, can one become a revolutionary, or you have to be born predisposed to become a revolutionary, because, for example, I'm from Russia right now, and maybe you've heard of this man, Alexei Navalny, who basically was killed in prison, in the Russian prison. And, he also supported this idea of peaceful protest, and he was killed. But when you talked about win, moral win. Navalny won, but he morally won. But a lot of people in Russia, and I guess around the world, kind of judged Navalny for coming back and basically dying. Like he let Putin killed him, and it's not like it's it's a controversial thing that he came back to Russia. But at the same time, if you look at Shelley's life and Navalny's life, for example, you can see these patterns, some kind of sparks that these people, they kind of were born with something that later let them become kind of leaders, or people who created frameworks and like they were revolutionaries. They didn't become revolutionaries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay.
That's a brilliant question. I think that Kierkegaard said that when a dictator dies, he dies. When a martyr dies, he lives forever. And I feel that that's true from a secular point of view. I think you put yourself in a pantheon. You put yourself. I think in terms of the example of Navalny, the idea of can you be born a revolutionary or do you? Well, you make choices, and you make choices based on a morality, but that morality doesn't exist in a vacuum. It comes through a combination of your culture, your environment, and decisions you make, people you meet, people you talk to, and your willingness to change and to listen to other people. My own personal life has been full of changed ideas and opinions that I'm sure my future life will be. And I've got a tolerance for people I disagree with, because I've been arguing on the wrong side enough times for me to not be arrogant when I do that. And Navalny himself has a political biography which is not straightforward. It's not, he was, he tried to be pro-Putin at one point, and to align himself and to in some way, and then he made decisions, rightly so, that he could no longer do that. He could no longer have that. That was no longer an option in terms of his own political outlook, and it was and I admire it. I admire something that so we are always creating ourselves. We are always creating ourselves in one form or another. It's difficult. I mean, it goes to a very deep philosophical question. You don't choose your choices. Your choices are given to you to some degree. I didn't choose to be English. I was born in England. I didn't choose my social class. I was born into it. The language I spoke, I can choose to learn another, but I don't know. There are loads of ways we can, a mixture of choices and a mixture of destiny or of circumstance, if you wish. But I think ultimately the idea of revolution is about giving people freedom to choose. So if we don't believe people are free to become revolutionaries, then what are we even doing if there's no freedom of choice? I think you have to start from the idea that there is such a thing as a and I think science kind of goes there, because the brain is plastic. So if you learn a language, your brain changes. You change a part of your brain, it reconfigures. If you have a brain injury, then that reconfigures as well. Other parts of your brain take the thing that the part of the brain that's been damaged can no longer do. And so I think that I think any notion of absolute free will is pointless and doesn't fit facts. But I think we have to act as if we are free, regardless of any proof that, you know, I think it's necessary that we have that notion of freedom more than that freedom being somehow provable or objectively true.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the point. Taha, yes.
Hi, do you have my voice?
Yes.
Yes. I first of all, great presentation. Thank you a lot. Especially like how you read "Ode to the West Wind." I never thought of it that way. But I really have a question about you talk about peaceful protest and peaceful resistance, but how much does that really work? Because I had a professor once who he was a very conservative fellow. He always thought that yes, protests can change many of the outside jelly like outside of a government, but you never can change the core, because the core, if the core changes, well, I always took what he meant. I don't think he wanted me to take it that way, but what he meant basically was, if you want to change that core, you have to be, put it all on the fire, burn it down to the ground. So I really wonder how much like Gandhi or Martin Luther King would do, because when they try to do a peaceful protest, they're not changing the whole nation. They're just changing the attitude, I think, or the freedom that existed before, and they want to go back to that. But in Iran, the protests that happened, well, 2-3 years ago, it doesn't want to go back to somewhere. It wants to change everything altogether. So how does that work? If you please.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm very aware that it's very easy to talk about something from a position of privilege and comfort and safety, and putting your life on the line and putting your well-being on the line and well-being of your loved ones is a much more dangerous and much more sobering possibility. I would argue that Gandhi did affect a huge change in India. I mean, the departure of Britain and the collapse of the British Empire was fairly significant. There were other factors, but Indian mass protests had a significant impact, and Martin Luther King, I would also argue, had a significant impact on the future of his country, especially with Lyndon Johnson's passing of the Civil Rights Bill. I would add to those two particular examples that you gave that they were very pragmatic. They knew that if they used violence, they would be absolutely massacred. So the idea of passive resistance, of peaceful protest and demonstrations was aimed specifically. There was a toughness to it. There was a like, okay, we'll set up a hospital and a thing, and you get your head broken, you go there, we'll fix you, and then we're putting you back in because we need people on the buses tomorrow. We need people to go on the buses and go to lunch counties tomorrow. So there was nothing sort of soft about it. It was they were really putting their lives on the line doing that, and it was horrendous. Now, the position that the people they were facing, the opposition they were facing, were violent, but they were hypocrites, because America and Britain both set themselves up as liberal democracies who believe in human rights. So if you make it clear that they're reneging on core values and principles that they have, if you put that on the 6 o'clock news, it's going to embarrass them, and they're going to have to do something to change. Okay? And so you're pushing at an open door. You're pushing at a door that can open. In other countries, those values are not as clearly designated or as clearly, or the opposition is informed by other values such as obedience or a chronic respect for authority, a certain degree of religiosity, for instance, would be another thing. That, you know, and in that case, and let's face it, Tiananmen Square. If the tanks don't open fire, Tiananmen Square happened the same year as the Berlin Wall fell down, or came down. In Berlin, the soldiers just didn't fire. If they'd fired, it would have changed the whole story. The whole story would be different. In Tiananmen Square, the soldiers opened fire. You know, so the protesters can only do so much. You know, and or you do, you know, I mean, look at Nelson Mandela in South Africa. You know, the apartheid regime was the most the most policed, the most, you know, aggressive white supremacist regime in the world, and we didn't have a bloody civil war. You would imagine that, you know, I lived through the 1980s. I went on marches for, you know, to free Nelson Mandela, and I felt the only way this is going to change is if there is a civil war, is if the blacks get guns and they wipe out the whites, and that's the only way it's going to happen, because the whites are never going to give in and the blacks are never going to forgive them. Rightly so. They're right not to forgive them. Nelson Mandela was not thrown in jail as a political prisoner. He was thrown in jail as a terrorist because they were planting bombs. You know, now they were planting bombs in a way that was not supposed to hurt people. It was supposed to be attacking electricity substations and to attack infrastructure. So that's another tactic which could be not exactly peaceful, but also not directly terroristic, you know, not attacking people. He won. You know, when it came down to it, him being in prison for all that time won. But he didn't have Putin. You know, if Putin had been, he would never have been allowed to stay in jail without being poisoned. So, you know, who you're facing is a significant part of whether you win or not. But all you can do is your part. All you can do is these are my values. This is how I think that the world should be. And this is what I'm not suggesting anybody sacrifice anything, but God, I don't know where I would be in such a position, but this is how I'm going to live my life. This is how far I'm willing to go. And hopefully you have to do it with a community. You have to do it. You can't do it individually. You have to do it with a community. The people we're talking about are leaders, but those leaders, they had the ANC behind them. They had the civil rights movement behind them. They had, armies of people behind them. You know, Gandhi wasn't on his own. He had, you know, hundreds of thousands of Indian activists willing to put themselves on the line. So, you know, it's a really tough one, and there are no easy answers. But there were a number of peaceful revolutions throughout Europe in the 1990s, you know, where things just toppled and places turned. Maidan in Ukraine was a peaceful revolution until it wasn't. You know, I absolutely, it's a great point to heart, and I don't think I can answer your question with any authority or with any, you know, yeah. I hope that I've given you a little bit of an answer. But I can hear it. I can hear myself not being as convincing as I wish I was.
No, it's okay. An MP, yes, and after Nima. Yep.
Hi, is my voice clear?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, my name is Negin. Nice to meet you, everyone. I just wanted to say that as a student who's joining this meeting from Iran, it was such a great opportunity for me to be here. And I just wanted to say thank you, Zahra, for planning this whole thing. And thank you so much, Doctor. It was actually my first time ever in my 22 years of life that I've ever had the opportunity to actually join a meeting that has a professor from another country. And thank you so much for answering all the questions so patiently. And the speech was amazing, and the opportunity was so great. I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to say a great thank you from all the students who are joining from Iran. And I wanted to say that how grateful we are to be at your presence and to have this opportunity. So I really hope that we would have more lectures like this. And yeah, just that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadine. That's very, very nice of you to say. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nikki. Nima, are you here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you have my voice?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Very well. I just wanted to make a reference to Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States in regard to what we were saying about revolutions and peaceful protests. Because, well, in that book, Howard Zinn tells us that, well, in the 19th century United States, as an example, as a microcosm, um, whenever we see that the protests are peaceful, it is because there is absolutely no way for a violent protestation, because that government or that locality does not allow it to become violent. So people are resorting to peaceful protestation. It's not like, well, they're just enjoying their peace and calm.
Yeah. I mean that's true. I mean, I think it's a tactical decision. I don't think and I think Shelley is to go back to Shelley's specific point of view. I think he is trying to show that if we become the thing they think we are, then we will lose. We will lose practically because they will just hang everybody, and we will lose morally because we will no longer have the high ground, so to speak. So I think he's saying, okay, let's do another demonstration because it scares them, and it makes us feel strong. But that peacefulness is conditional. I think that's the thing and I think that's true in terms of Martin Luther King and Gandhi as well. Martin Luther King, the Million Man March, is an act of political intimidation. It's about saying, look how many we are, and okay, we'll be peaceful today, but just bear in mind there's a lot of us, and we're organized, and we're sober, and we're not lazy, and we're not all these stereotypes that you keep saying we are, and we're going to, where our peacefulness is not passivity, it's waiting, it's contemplation, it's rationalism, and it's waiting for an opportunity, and when the time comes, who knows,
Thank you. I think it's just a Fatima, yes, because after we give a lot of time to you, it's gonna be 1.5 hours. I'm so sorry about that. Fatima, go ahead. Yes.
Shall I say, first of all, special thanks to your marvelous speech, because talking about Byron and Shelley, something came to my mind. I read some article according to Ozymandias. As you said, Shelley was in charge of power. He actually resembled Byron with the figure of that pharaoh who had in his Ozymandias that he looks like that. He's the malnutrition, and so exciting that you could relate them in this way. And we were like, okay, he was really revolutionary, and he didn't let anyone to actually prevent him from doing this thing that he wanted. Thank you so much. That was great.
There's a
Yes, yes, yes.
there's a
Sorry.
real. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, nothing. Continue.
There's a really interesting poem called Julian and Madelot, which is about Byron and Shelley. Shelley is Julian and Madelot is Byron, riding their horses on the Lido in Venice, and they have this interesting conversation. They meet. They go to an asylum, and they meet a crazy person, and it's a really interesting poem because it's these two very now very famous people. It's a poem about their conversation, and I see their friendship as being that. It's a conversation. It's a conversation between two very intelligent figures who disagreed, and the other thing that's kind of weird about it is Shelley was not a successful poet in his lifetime. His fame came posthumously, mainly because of his wife, Mary Shelley, not because of his wife just being the author of Frankenstein, but also because his wife was the person who edited the first edition of his poems and published it, and spent the rest of her life promoting Shelley and promoting him in a way which really means we have Shelley today. If she didn't do that, I mean, you talk about behind every man there is a great woman, but behind and in front of Shelley there was a great woman, and a great woman on her own terms as well, in terms of her writing. So but when he was alive, he was this, Prometheus Unbound, his most important work poetically, which he knew, sold 14 copies. 14. Okay. Lord Byron, his book The Corsair, sold 20,000 copies in a single day in London. He was a mega star. He was a rock star, and Shelley couldn't get anyone to listen to his song at a party. If he got a guitar out at a party, everybody left, and he'd be on his own in the kitchen. Byron was filling out stadiums. Fancy being friends with those two. You know what I mean? Those two different levels of success. It's nuts, but it's the fact that they managed to be friends and they managed to see the good in each other and the value of each other. It makes me a bit romantic just thinking. He was a celebrity back then. When Byron entered a room, people applauded, and everyone was like, what? And also he was a celebrity on the flip side of that as well, because he had an affair with his half sister. He had to leave England because he knew somebody would insult him, and then he'd have to fight a duel, and then he'd kill someone. So he had to leave England. So he had the scandal of celebrity as well as the fame. So yeah, he actually said, I woke up one day and found myself famous. That was his quote. So, he invented the modern notion of fame, and the modern notion of fame out of poetry. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Amir, go ahead, but please quickly. Can you hear us, Amir? No.
Oh, maybe Amir's.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah.
It's fine. Okay. Then thank you so much. And for sure, the record of this session it's gonna be available in our channel, Telegram, and I show you all the presentations that the professor just sent it to me. I share it with all of you guys. Thank you for being with us. It was amazing. We get a lot of time about you, ambassadors. It's wonderful. It was my pleasure for sure and my honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care. Good night.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. It was amazing. Thank you for being with us. See you maybe on next Wednesday. Bye.